Hi class, wanted to go over chapter 2 in Flat World Knowledge using Microsoft Excel, Careers in Practice. We will be working on mathematical computations today. This chapter we will have several lessons, therefore this PowerPoint presentation is going to cover the entire chapter, but you will be working on lessons and in different phases, different lessons, different sections. So all of the topics that are covered here will not be in each lesson. Each lesson will be broken down into smaller segments so that you can grasp material and practice. So this is an overview of the entire chapter 2, Mathematical Computations. Please reference it often as you need to go over specific areas that you need to understand, or just to practice. And in Excel, I think the more you practice, the better off you'll be. So we'll get started. Learn how to create basic formulas. We're going to be doing quite a bit in this chapter, and I want to go over this first page fairly quickly. Many of you may already know how to create basic formulas, but I would suggest that in chapters 1 and 2, that we expound on what we already know, mainly because some of the things that we know are maybe narrow in scope because we only needed certain information and we use certain information over and over again. Let's use this chapter to expand our knowledge in Excel and use some complicated and complex formulas to generate some really neat and interesting output. So we're going to go over some basic formulas. We're going to get deeper into that, of course. Relative referencing, we're going to talk about that. And also when copying and pasting, what does it all mean, really? And I think practice is going to really make this clear to you. We're going to work with some complex formulas. We're going to start with very few formulas in the beginning and then gradually pick it up a little bit. We're going to review the formula or auditing tools and use the sum function. And I have to say about the sum function, is probably the most used function within Excel. And you will already know this, that it's just something we do without thinking twice. And it is a really huge feature. So I think it's very appropriate to talk about it early on. We'll use absolute references. And what we need to do, when we talk about absolute references, we want to be able to lock down our formulas to ensure that the reference that we're using remains fixed and not, change when we copy and paste our formulas to different cells. And we'll go over some practice problems and some exercises as we go along. The functions that we will use in addition to auto sum will be the count function, the average function, the maximum and the minimum. We will be learning how to copy and paste formulas without formats, and also with formats. And then we'll also use, we'll be working on a multiple level of sequences for data sets that, we can duplicate things. And I guess that's for efficiency purposes. The count function, we'll talk about those in detail, and average and maximum and minimum. And I'll give you a few examples of when those types of functions are really, really useful. The PMT function, in the text, we're going to use it to calculate payments on mortgages and lease payments. But in business, you want the PMT function to for determining whether or not a payment is within the budget or within your affordability. So we'll use personal finance in this chapter, but it definitely has applicability in business in business environments and business problems. I'm going to calculate the monthly payments. For example, if we want to know how much it costs for a $15,000 car with a 10% interest rate, how much would it be each month? Those kind of questions you can answer quite easily in Excel. We're going to also use the future value function, which is the FV. And we're going to say, well, if we have $50 today, how much will that money be, future value be in the future, given a level of interest and compounding? And again, these are personal things that you can use, but you can also use it in business. And I have used it in business. It's actually a very useful tool, and it's quite simple to create in Excel. We will link files together using we will link files together in the workbooks, and we will use create summary worksheets or workbooks within Excel. Quite easy to do and very useful, in fact. Will you be working on what if formulas, etc.? Well, for right now, let's talk about basic formulas. As you know, they're used to calculate mathematical outputs, but in a nutshell, we're actually creating some kind of mathematical calculation. It could be division, it could be adding, it could be subtracting, or a combination of those. They're used for lots of reasons and lots of different ways to calculate within Excel, and just a few of them I've just named. We will talk about functions and formulas and how they work together within a cell reference. And as you know, a cell reference is a cell address in a worksheet or workbook. And so we'll be working with those type of things. Um, and again, some more terms that you'll probably will know intuitively, but just to remind you, constants are numerical values used in the construction of a formula, and we'll be working with those as well and knowing the differences between the two. Cell reference, it enables you to produce outputs when one or more outputs are referenced or changed. And what does that really mean? It means that when you change a formula by copying it into a different place, the reference changes in consistent with that reference. So you're actually able to copy more efficiently and not have to replicate manually the cell reference when you're actually doing calculations and formulas. And that's very useful when you're dealing with very complicated formulas. Universal consonants will be used. There are values that can be used and they don't change. That's the main thing about the universal constant. Constant meaning it just stays the same. And we'll think about those and use those in various scenarios throughout the chapter. Relative references, and we mentioned this before. What is a relative reference? It just automatically, it's just Excel's way of automatically adjusting a formula when you copy it from one location to another. Simple as that. And one of the reasons why we use it is because it makes calculating one cell and copying it to another cell so easy. Instead of having to redo the entire formula every single time, you can just copy and paste it, and relative referencing makes it so convenient for you to do that and automatically adjust the formula in accordance with your new location. Now, obviously, when you have a lot of calculations in your spreadsheet, you just can't just look at them and say, "Oh, okay, it's fine." You have to make certain the output that you're producing, it makes sense, it's accurate, and it's giving you what you're looking for. So logic and common sense can't be overlooked when you're dealing with Excel, because Excel is going to do what you tell it to do. You have to make certain that it makes sense. Um, when we're dealing with complex formulas, it's very important to note that we have to control the order of operations, and we do that using parentheses. And we'll talk about that in detail when we go into complex formulas and different functions. Auditing formulas allows you to go back and trace what you've done to ensure that the formula is actually picking up or calculating correctly the cells that you've actually put into your spreadsheet. And you can do that by using two different commands. One is trace precedence and one is trace dependence commands. And we'll talk about the details of those and examples of how they're used as you proceed through the chapter. We're going to skip through these questions because I think they're in your book. But what I would suggest is when you're going through your reading in your chapter, that you ensure that each one of these questions you know the answers to before proceeding further. Again, these are just to test your knowledge of what you've read. Cell ranges and statistical functions. When you use statistical functions, and again, we have mathematical functions, we have statistical functions, we have so many different types of functions. It's important that the ranges are separated, if necessary, by a comma, not by a colon. Not by a colon, but not by a comma. And what you want to do is when you're using these types of statistical functions, it's important where those commas or colons are placed, because that will definitely impair the function's ability to calculate correctly. So we'll be talking about some of those things too, and how Excel is quite specific about what goes in what cell and what it would recognize. Otherwise, you'll get an error message. The sum function I talked about, and I said, wow, this is probably the best thing that comes in Excel, and that's the ability to sum things very, very quickly. But you can, sum a range of cells just by clicking a button, and we'll talk about those different types of function keys and where they are placed within the Excel program. Absolute reference is a great tool when you want the reference to remain the same. You don't want it changing like it would in relative referencing. What you want is for that reference, that cell that you're referencing, to remain the same no matter where you copy the formula. And we can show you exactly how to do that. And I think it's extremely useful when you're working with formulas and functions that are complicated. Locking down your reference is important because it keeps you from having to manipulate each and every time you copy that formula to a different cell within your workbook. The count function. We use the count function. I'll give you an example. If you're grading papers and you want to count the range of individual people who took the test. We want to count and it doesn't matter if it's numeric or if it's text. It's just made to determine how many cells in a range. And it's basically counting 1, 2, 3, how many you see. However, the average function takes an average out of range of numbers within a group of cells. And all you want is the mean. You want to know if you have 5 different grades and you want to know the average of those grades. You add them up and then you divide it by the number of items in that cell. That's a basic average calculation that is done within Excel quite easily. The max and minimum functions can be used when you're trying to determine what's the lowest number, what's the highest number. And one example would be you're trying to determine the highest grade on a test or the lowest grade on a test. And it's very useful to denote the highest and lowest values within a range of cells. Copy paste is going to be something you're going to use all the time. This is one of the most frequently used functions within Excel. Copy one formula to another place. You can copy text from one place to another, and that reduces redundancy. It just makes it easier. It allows you to compare between this and that, and it also allows you to maintain the formatting, or you can not maintain the formatting. It's totally up to you, but copy and paste functions are very, very useful. Sorting data. When you have a lot of information that you're comparing, sometimes it's important that you sort it in a certain way, and the sorting feature within Excel is very useful when you're trying to analyze trends, when you're trying to compare and contrast two different types of events or quantitative analysis. It's important to be able to sort it in a certain way so you have so much available to you when you're sorting data within Excel. Here are some questions that you can ask. Now, I suggest you, before you go forward in the chapter, that you go through these questions, these multiple choice questions, because they are going to be the basis of your test that you'll have, but also to ensure that you've read the material and you understand it. Now, fundamentals of loans and leases, just want to make sure you go over the terms that are used. PMT is a function, and it calculates the payment for a loan or lease, or anything that you want to determine the payment of. So PMT is payment. This function allows you to provide a series of arguments, and we'll talk about what arguments mean in Excel, but it allows you a series of arguments in order to produce a reliable output. It calculates payments required for a loan or lease. It requires any kind of payment. If you wanted to see how many payments you need to make in order to have X amount of money in 15 years, you can use the PMT function to do that. And I'm going to end with this. This chapter goes over linking of worksheets, etc. This is going to be an extremely useful and efficient tool that you'll need when you are trying to keep the files together and maintain the integrity of all files and have them all updated at the same time. As you read through this chapter, I urge you to continue to go through exercises and practice problems to make certain that you understand and reinforce the material. This will end our lecture, and if you have any questions, by all means give me a question in the discussion topic Q&A. Thank you.